Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. Saudi Arabia says it is ready to support a peaceful political solution to the conflict in Yemen. Deputy Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman says the kingdom is committed to the well-being of the Yemeni people. Meeting with the UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths, the Saudi Defense Minister called on Houthi rebels to uphold their signed commitments, including the Stockholm Agreement. Earlier, the UN said Yemen's warring sides have agreed to bolster a ceasefire deal and reduce tensions around the port of Hodeidah. It said both the sides have agreed to the technical aspects of a troop withdrawal. The UN Security Council has extended its ceasefire observation mission in Hodeidah by 6 months. The UN has voiced concerns over the tough restrictions imposed by the US on Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif's movement in New York. Iran's top diplomat is visiting the US to attend a meeting at the UN headquarters. Despite issuing a visa to Zarif, the US has barred him from moving beyond 6 blocks of Iran's UN mission in New York. Last month, Washington threatened to impose sanctions on Zarif, adding to tensions with Tehran. At a meeting of the European Union foreign ministers in Brussels, the EU has said it does not see Tehran's actions as enough to break the 2015 nuclear deal. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said members have no intention to trigger the Accords dispute process. Earlier, UN watchdog IAEA confirmed that Iran has exceeded stock limit of low-enriched uranium agreed in the 2015 deal.
For the time being, with the current data we have had, in particular from the IAEA, that the non-compliance is considered to be a significant non-compliance.
Meanwhile, France's President Emmanuel Macron said he will talk to leaders of Iran, Russia and the US to prevent escalation of tensions in the Middle East. Now moving on to the UK, where the leadership hopeful Boris Johnson says he will not back the US if it takes military action against Iran. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt says the US and Iran are not looking to start a war. Hunt and Johnson were taking part in the final head-to-head debate of the Conservative leadership campaign. The two candidates said even a significant concession from the EU on the Irish border would be insufficient. Both contenders stressed the need to de-escalate Gulf tensions.
We are working to do at the moment is to try and de-escalate as many of the tensions as we possibly can, because this is the one part of the world where if things go wrong, they can go wrong in a very big and bad way, and that's why we've absolutely got to be on our watch.
The winner of UK's leadership race will be announced on July the 23rd, and May will officially relinquish the keys to 10 Downing Street on July the 24th. Now moving on to Iraq, where 5 people have been killed in twin suicide explosions near a mosque in southwest Baghdad. Medics said 14 others were wounded in the attack. Meanwhile, Iraqi security forces killed 8 ISIS militants in an operation in desert area in central Salahuddin province. The military said it seized a large amount of weapons and ammunition from the fighters' hideout. Scores of demonstrators have taken to the streets of Khartoum to protest against the killing of a civilian allegedly by paramilitary troops. Police fired tear gas and baton-charged demonstrators to disperse the crowd. Witnesses say similar demonstrations have also taken place in other parts of the country. This comes after further delays to signing of a power-sharing deal between the military and the civilian opposition. The civilian opposition says the agreement will be signed after a constitutional declaration that determines powers of a new ruling council. Turkey says the EU's decision to curb contacts and funding will not affect its drilling for gas off the coast of Cyprus. The Turkish Foreign Ministry has also condemned the European Union's decision to suspend high-level talks on the divided island. It accused the EU of being biased and partisan over Cyprus. This comes after Austria and Germany proposed new sanctions on Turkey at a meeting of the EU's Foreign Affairs Council. The Council decided to suspend negotiations on an air transport agreement with Ankara. It also agreed to temporarily end high-level dialogue with Turkey. Ankara stands to lose 150 million euros in pre-accession EU funding earmarked for 2020. A Venezuelan government delegation has arrived in Barbados to take part in a new round of talks with the opposition. The negotiations aim to establish a peaceful mechanism to settle disputes. President Maduro's communication minister, Jorge Rodriguez, says the government is trying to find a constitutional and democratic resolution to the differences. Envoys representing opposition leader Juan Guaido at the talks say they are aiming for a change in the government. Last week, rival factions agreed to set up a platform for negotiations mediated by Norway after 3 days of talks on the Caribbean island. Monsoon storms and flooding have wreaked havoc across South Asia, claiming 150 lives over the last 5 days. Nepal has been the worst hit, with flash flooding and landslides killing 78 people and injuring 30 others. 22 people have been killed and 7 others injured in a flash flood in Pakistan's Nilam Valley. 28 people have lost their lives in northeastern India. Talking about China, where the 17 people died in rainstorms across the country. 12 people have been killed in lightning in Bangladesh. For more on this, we are joined by our New Delhi correspondent, Neha Punia. Neha, thank you for joining in. First of all, talking about India, Nepal and Bangladesh. So what do you think the officials over there are saying about the scale of the humanitarian crisis brought on by the monsoon storms?
The devastation has been quite massive and widespread. When you speak of Nepal, about 10,000 people have been displaced. Nepal has been the worst hit, with over 60 deaths reported, and the flooding there has been quite extensive, so much so that in many areas the flood waters are now flooding into the North Indian state of Bihar that shares a border with Nepal. In Bihar, you've got 5 rivers that are flowing in spate. The Chief Minister a short while back held an aerial review of the worst hit areas as well. Many of those living in rural areas or living in makeshift homes are bearing the brunt of this deluge, and millions have been evacuated in Bihar. In Assam, which is the worst hit state in India, 4 million people have been displaced so far. The government has set up about 200 odd relief centers. 83,000 people have been evacuated so far. The army and paramilitary forces have been pressed into the rescue and relief operations. Many of them are using boats to reach the areas that may have been cut off because of the flood waters. Many areas have become inaccessible, and there's also a concern about the kind of damage that's being wrought to an area like the Kaziranga National Park, which is home to the one-horned rhinoceros. 80% of that park is completely inundated as well. So government officials say that the idea now is to rescue people and animals as quickly as possible because there is more rain predicted for the days ahead. And in Bangladesh, an area that's not new to these kind of weather patterns, about 5,000 people have lost their homes. Many of them live in the Cox's Bazar district, which is home to 1 million Rohingya refugees. These are concerns that were voiced way back at the beginning of the year, that this area is going to be very vulnerable in the event of excessive rainfall or even flooding.
Okay, Neha, as we all know that monsoon season affects this part of the world every year. So it has to happen every year. So there must be, I just want to know what are those areas of concentration where the people are the most affected. Do they actually lay around the river banks where they are affected the most? And are there any preemptive measures, the preventive measures already taken by the concerned authorities? Because we all know that it has to happen in this particular season. So why are those preventive measures or the pre-planning doesn't take place?
You're right in saying that this area is not new to seeing this kind of deluge. In fact, in the state of Assam and Bihar, we see these kind of headlines every year. It's a similar story in Bangladesh and Nepal as well, and that's the question that authorities are also grappling with. After last year's devastating floods in Assam, the government said it is working on flood mitigation plans, essentially ensuring that the embankments of rivers are strengthened. There would be a closer look at the kind of encroachment that's happened on riverbeds and the kind of urbanization that takes place in a completely unchecked fashion. But this is a twofold problem. One, we're also seeing because of climate change, weather patterns have become more intense. They become slightly less predictable. So that is one problem that authorities are dealing with. Two, of course, like I said, the human intervention problem, which will need a long-term solution. For example, in the next 3 days, there will be more rainfall. Many rivers, including the mighty Brahmaputra that flows not only in Assam but also in Bangladesh, is expected to continue to rise. It's currently flowing at the danger mark, and the worry is that immediately something needs to be done to rescue these people. These mitigation plans are long-term plans that will perhaps be implemented over several years. But for now, the idea is to get these people out. And the government also admits here in India that often evacuating people from their homes, especially in rural areas, is a massive challenge. So that is an aspect that the government says they're going to be working on in the years ahead.
Okay, so obviously the evacuation of the people from the disaster hit areas takes much more budget actually, and a lot of effort afterwards. So what exactly we can expect in the days coming? Are the meteorologists saying that there would be further rains and it might cause more flooding as well?
That's the concern, yes, that there is more rain forecast for the coming days, and this is true for not just India but also Nepal and Bangladesh. And authorities also saying it's not just the rain that's causing a problem, it's also the risk of waterborne diseases in many areas. Like I said, the water has reached levels that are very, very high. Most areas in Assam, for example, have been cut off entirely. Many rivers are already flowing at the danger mark. A red alert has been sounded because the expectation is even little more rainfall will lead to many of these rivers breaching their banks, which would in turn impact thousands of people across the states of Bihar, Assam, as well as in Bangladesh. So the concern now is to try and evacuate people before that happens. But of course, there's nothing you can do about the rain as of now.
Neha, we have seen this time around the monsoon arrived a few weeks late. But before that, we had been having news, particularly we talk about the Indian city of Chennai. There were reports of water shortage over there. Did you talk about to the meteorologists, and what are they opining? What is their opinion about this particular trend? Is this because of the climate change?
This is sadly the reality for most of the Indian subcontinent. While you have areas like Chennai that are completely parched, that are running out of groundwater at an alarming rate, then you have areas like Assam and the northeast where rainfall every year is plentiful, and many times it's devastating in the kind of aftermath it leaves behind. This is not new to India. This is something we've seen for decades. For example, in the state of Maharashtra, there is one part that deals with a drought every year, while another part in Mumbai receives excessive rainfall. But you're right in saying that these weather patterns have become more intense in the last few years because of climate change, and experts are sounding an alarm. They're saying this is not going to change or improve in the years ahead.
Thank you, Neha, for updating us regarding the current situation in different parts of South Asia, including India, Bangladesh and Nepal, which has been worst hit by the monsoon rains, landslides and flooding. That was our new Delhi correspondent, Neha Punia. Now moving on, the United Nations says more than 821 million people suffered from hunger last year. A UN report launched in New York says reaching the zero hunger target by 2030 is an immense challenge. The report says after decades of decline, malnutrition began to increase in 2015 due to climate change and war. This is the third year in a row the number has risen. The UN report says malnutrition remains widespread in Africa, with 20% of the population affected. In Asia, more than 12% of the people experience hunger. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the number is 7%. The annual report says hunger is increasing in countries where economic growth is lagging. It has found that since 2012, no progress has been made in reducing low birth weight. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. Welcome back. A UN report says 20 million children missed out on life-saving vaccines last year, prepared by UNICEF and World Health Organization. The report pointed to alarming cut in global vaccination rates due to conflicts and inequality. According to the report, the vaccination coverage against diphtheria, tetanus and measles has stalled at 86% since 2010. It said measles cases around the globe doubled last year, with 2019 set to be worse.
There are 19.4 million children who remain in 2018 who have been either fully unimmunized or underimmunized. And that means that more than 1 in 10 children are not getting the full complement of the vaccines that they need, are missing out on life-saving vaccines.
Almost half the world's unvaccinated children are in just 16 countries, and if these children fall ill, they are at risk of the severe health consequences and are at least able to get the treatment they need. Now moving on to Italy, where the police have seized a large arsenal of weapons, including an air-to-air missile, in raids on a far-right extremist group. The raids were part of an investigation into Italian far-right groups' help for Russia-backed separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. Police have arrested 3 suspects on charges of selling the missile through social media networking site WhatsApp. Guns, bayonets, silencers, rifle scopes and more than 800 bullets were also seized during the raids. Doctors in Rome have warned people to stay away from roadside garbage dumps. Stray animals feasting on the piles of trash have created a possible health emergency. Meanwhile, locals are fuming over the lack of waste management in the city. Details in this report.
Any mention of Rome usually brings the city's cultural heritage or great Italian food to mind. But nowadays, tourists are navigating overflowing rubbish bins in the stifling heat. Doctors have warned the city may have a health emergency on its hands.
With this heat and with this situation, there could be a hygienic emergency in the sense that we must remain vigilant to avoid that it could turn into a health emergency. Prevention is better than a cure, as they say, so we decided to alert all the institutional actors in the system.
The garbage also attracts animals, which cause even more problems.
I live in the center, where it's even worse because there are seagulls, mice, all kinds of animals, mosquitoes, flies, full of insects and animals. That's enough.
Locals blame the government, which they say is corrupt to the core.
This is the most disorganized capital in the world for everything, for buses too, everything. If something goes wrong, it's in Rome for sure.
On the 10th of July, Environment Minister Sergio Costa vowed to resolve the problem within 15 days. Rome generates 5,000 tons of garbage daily, and the city doesn't even have its own incinerator. The scale of the problem, combined with the government's alleged inefficiency, makes it unlikely Costa will be able to deliver on his promise. For now, though, overflowing dumpsters are as much a feature of Rome as the Colosseum or the Pantheon.
And now the business updates. Asia's major equity markets have crept higher as investors wait for the U.S. retail sales data and corporate earnings. Markets remain focused on a likely U.S. interest rate cut this month. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan was fractionally up, with losses in Chinese shares capping gains elsewhere in the region. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose slightly, as did South Korea's Kospi. China's blue chip CSI 300 and the Nikkei 225 traded lower. Australia's ASX 200 also lost ground. English club Tottenham Hotspur have joined the race with Arsenal and Manchester City to sign Brazil captain Dani Alves. Dani Alves is a free agent after he refused to extend his contract with Paris Saint-Germain. He is considered the most successful current player in the world with a personal trophy tally of 40. Arsenal have reportedly prepared a hefty £45 million offer for the Brazilian captain. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola is also keen to reunite with the right back in England. The pair enjoyed remarkable success in their 4 years together at Camp Nou. Spurs are willing to invest big in their defence, with Kieran Trippier likely to be sold after a disappointing season. New Juventus prospect Aaron Ramsey hopes to emulate club legend John Charles at Turin. Ramsey is the third Welshman to play for Juventus after John Charles and Ian Rush. Speaking at his first news conference, the Welsh midfielder said he is looking forward to embracing a new culture. Ramsey also confirmed that he will wear a Juventus number 8 shirt previously worn by Claudio Mauricio. Now moving on, in the FINA World Championship, China's Cao Yuan and Chen Aisen win gold in the men's 10-meter synchro platform. China's peerless drivers made it 7 from 7 at the World Championships. The Olympic champions Yuan and Aisen racked up 486.93 points, swatting aside their nearest rivals by a massive 42 points. Russia's Viktor Minibaev and Alexander Bondar took silver, while Britain's Tom Daly and Lee Matthew settled for bronze. And now the weather updates. That's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.